All right, now that we've done a little bit to the universal selector, everything's pared down to 0, and we do have a wrapper in place. But first and foremost, before we do anything else, let's take care of a couple of things. I'm going to instruct you to create a new CSS rule, and this is not going to be a class, it's going to be a tag that redefines a specific HTML element. And in this case, the HTML element is the body. Notice, of course, we're defining this rule in our external style.css file. All right, so if we come back here and click OK, what do we want to do with this body? Well, it's a small little trick that I want to talk to you about that's specific to Internet Explorer and, versions 5 and 6, older versions of Internet Explorer. Now, not as many people are using those browsers, but there's still a small percentage of people that are. The main problem with those browser users is the simple fact that the little trick that we did with the auto margins on the wrapper is not really going to work in terms of centering the document in those browsers. So the way that we center the document in those older browsers is to go to the category called block. And as you can see here, what I'm going to do is to say text align center. Now, if I click OK, you could even apply that, but we don't have any text in here, so it won't really show up. So just say OK. Well, at this point, you'll notice that if I was to write in some text, sample text or something like this, let's take a look. If we refresh this, we'll notice that the sample text is right in the middle of our browser. That's not at all where I want it to be. I want my text to be left aligned. If I had this all centered, it would end up making my website look like a wedding invitation, which is the last thing we want to have happening in here. So instead of having that happen, we're going to go back to our CSS rule. And here where we have our wrapper, what we can do is, remember, the text is inside the wrapper. So while the body, which is represented by this white area, is centering all the text and at the same time not just the text but everything else on the body, that's for the older browsers, Internet Explorer's older versions. So in order to sort of circumvent this centering of the text, all we got to do is to say, tell the wrapper, here I'm going to hit the edit rule, and when we go inside here, we'll go to the block and we'll say, hey, look, everything on the body is set to be centered, but what I want to do is to say anything inside the wrapper, which is basically the entire site, will be text aligned left, back to the default. And if you click apply, you can see now that your text is left aligned inside the wrapper. And that's perfect. That's exactly what we want to have happening in here. One last thing I want to do, while we're at the body and we go to the editing here, we can go to the background. And as you'll notice, the background color of my body is defaulted to white. That's perfectly fine if you've got a white background. But if you remember, I'm just going to hit Command Tab on my Mac or Alt Tab on the PC, and we'll switch over to Photoshop. And if you can see and quite well remember, we had been using swatches that we downloaded from the Adobe Swatch Exchange, and in there we decided upon a background color for us to use. So you can take your eyedropper tool or you could just pick it from your swatches, and as you can see here, what I'm going to be doing is just selecting this particular background color. If I double click that, or just single click actually, here the color picker for the foreground color gives you a value that is a hexadecimal number. Hexadecimal numbers are what we use inside of our web designs. So, I mean, certainly you could use an RGB value when you're working with CSS, but it's much easier to just give one definition, one value. So I'm going to select everything that's in here, Command C or Control C on a PC to copy this information. Click OK. Command Tab, I'll go back to Dreamweaver, and as you can see here, this is my background color. Now look, you could choose from any of the colors that you have here, and if there's nothing that you like, you can also go to some of these colors here. Now it doesn't really look like there's colors, but you can just bring that up or down for the brightness level, and you could choose a color like this if you wished. And just to show you, if I pressed apply, bang, you see all of those colors. But that's not what we want. We have a color that we're working with. So I'm going to paste in the color that we copied from Photoshop, and I'll click apply, and check it out. The entire body now conforms to that particular color. Click OK, and that's perfectly fine for us. But as you're going to be seeing a little bit later on, I'm also going to be doing a couple of other tricks to change the body's background color and make the wrapper have this particular color that we're looking at. But nevertheless, at this point, I can get rid of that sample text. We've got our wrapper in place. We've got the universal selector paring everything down to 0 margin and padding. The body is centering things for older Internet Explorer browsers, and the wrapper is also doing it. Now notice here, style.css, I can actually go in here and write, again, a little comment to myself, or to yourself for that matter. And inside of this little comment, I'm just going to say, this definition is used for older IE browsers. And here, that's a little way that you can define that. And you could also write a little note. Text align left in the wrapper was to put everything back to its default, away from the centered. So I'm going to save this. Notice the asterisk will disappear when I press Control S or Command S. And now we're back at the source code. So we've got our body in place, got our wrapper set up the way we want to, and we've got our universal selector. Now it's time for us to deal with all of the other divs that we're going to be placing inside of our wrapper.